So, sir, what are you saying, sir, that the 21st Amendment will not work?
Even if it's passed, it's a farce. It'll work to keep the present government in power and keep the present president with almost the same powers in power. A president who says, I have failed and I will go. A president who said, I will abolish the presidency and I will improve governance. Yes, he's keeping the status quo. So I personally feel the 21st Amendment should be shot down because it's not what they promised to do. The failed government, it's not what they promised to do. Under the guise of an amendment, they are only entrenching themselves and strengthening themselves to continue when in the face of it they have been total failures. So when you mean by work? If you want it to work like the 20th Amendment, yes, it might work. And do you want that? That's it. And I would think that it's a 20th Amendment, this amendment. I would not blame the SJB, the JVP and any other parties who vote against it, because it is a fraud on the people. That's my view.
So what is the way out then? Where do we go from here?
I said there are very limited actions that we can try in a court of law, but it requires a huge mass movement to once and for all disability, because you had 6.9 million people who voted. And surely those 6.9 people should realize, forget whom they voted in before, but whom are you going to vote in future? What are you going to have for the future? Not for us, but for the young people who are questioning me and you now, as well as for future generation. It has to be mainly extra legal. I'm not saying violence or illegal, but it has to come with severe public pressure all around.
Welcome to another session in the MBA Diaries, where we will be talking and meeting an expert, veterans in different platforms on different fields. And of course, as Asia Pacific Institute of Information Technology, we are honored to be hosting this session today as well with another veteran in the global corporate world. And one of our dear sirs, one of our very nice human beings, I would say, in Sri Lanka. And will be a very special conversation today with this special guest. So to start off for the day, let me warmly welcome all our students who are joining us from Staffordshire University, and all our delegates and the guests who are joining us from different parts of the world, and our members of the partner universities, along with all the other distinguished guests. So to start with, let me warmly welcome Dr. Rohan, who is the pioneering personality behind this networking project, bringing the exposure to all our students, to introduce the speaker for the day and start the session. Dr. Rohantha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kaushali, and I'm actually honored to introduce one of the most eminent Sri Lankans that we currently have in our country. As you know, we have only a very few good men, sad to say, and that's why sadly, we have this country in the current situation. So he's a President's Council, past President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka in the years 2015-16, 2016 and 17. He was admitted to the bar having passed his final examination at the Sri Lanka Law College with first-class honors. He holds an honors degree in law from the Faculty of Law of the University of Colombo. He accounts for over 40 years in the legal practice. He practices in the original appellate courts of Sri Lanka, specializing in industrial, corporate banking, and intellectual property law, and engages in advisory practice in the industrial and commercial transactions, among others. He also practices before statutory authorities, bodies, commercial arbitration tribunals. He has also taken constitutional law and governance. And his amazing management talent and background has taken him in terms of actually following, global leadership programs conducted by INSEAD in collaboration with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. He's a director of the Law and Society Trust and a member of the Center for the Study for Human Rights, University of Colombo, Faculty of Law, and a member of the Board of Faculty of Law. He has examined and lectured at the Faculty of Law of the University of Colombo and lectured for the LLM programs conducted by the Faculty of Law, University of Colombo. Ladies and gentlemen, the President's Council, past President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, Geoffrey Alagaratnam, who will talk to us about this most debated 21st Amendment and whether it's going to work. So over to you.
Yeah. So we talk of the 21st or the 22nd Amendment. First of all, will it work? What we have to realize is we talk of amendments, and there has been a well-known joke about the Sri Lankan Constitution, because we have had so many amendments since its inception that one wonders whether it's a periodical or a monthly magazine that comes out, or whether it is really a serious document which governs everybody in this country. As you know, a constitution is the basis for the whole government or all laws that flow from it. The constitution is the main document. It's like the birth certificate of a country. So why do we talk of amendments? We talk of 21st, 22nd amendments, because we have been always trying to tinker around or make changes. Is it because we have found various errors in the original constitution? Or is it because we are changing it to suit some particular, I won't call them rulers, our so-called representatives in parliament or elsewhere, whether they are changing the constitution to give them greater power or to help themselves rather than the country? Those are questions we need to ask at the outset. And one of the fundamental things about a constitution is that it is the basic law. A lot of people do not realize the importance of a constitution because we are caught up in our day-to-day life, our living, our earning, our food, our clothing. But we do not realize that our society, if it has to function properly, has to be held together by some basic, shall we say, laws or norms. And that is why a constitution is there, to say, okay, everything has to follow from the constitution. It is the constitution that is the guiding light. Whatever laws are passed have to be in line with the constitution, whether it's marriage laws, criminal law, or any other law. So normally you have a constitution as the foundation of any society. In Sri Lanka, we say we have a socialist democratic republic. What does all this mean? Are they only words? What we have to understand is a democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Demos, people. So that anybody who holds any office under the constitution is really a servant, an agent for the people of the country. Because we talk of sovereignty. A lot of people talk of sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty is basically who is the person who is the key person or the chief person in this country. And if you look through our constitution, it is the people, not the president, not the parliamentarian, not the minister, not the judiciary. All these guys are only supposed to look after the interests of the people. In other words, they are representatives of the people. They hold office in trust. It brings me to the next point, that before we go into the aspects of amendment of the constitution, you can have the best of constitutions. As you can see, we are going into a 21st amendment or a 22nd amendment, which is sad because it shows that we have to keep tinkering and changing things for various reasons. In other words, our constitution either lacks or is defective, or it has to be changed too often. But what we have to basically understand is, whatever the constitution may be, we need people who work it. Who are the people who work it? The elected representatives, the people in parliament, the cabinet of ministers, the president, as it were. And those are the guys who have to work it. Even the worst of constitutions, if it is worked or followed by honorable people and good people, they will make sure that the constitution is used for the benefit of the people and not for themselves, because they are only representing the people. So you need good men to run the constitution, because like in law, everybody says, sometimes we say the law is an ass, because the law can be used by both parties to give opposite arguments. And they say sometimes the law is like, pardon me for being male chauvinistic, but saying a law is like a prostitute or a harlot, can be used by anyone to suit its purpose. So like that, the constitution can be abused by a ruler. Very often, it all depends on the ruler. They can ignore it or twist it to suit their purpose. That's why you see, look at a lot of democracies. You look at Britain, the UK. It does not have a written constitution, because they believe that when you have a written constitution, there can be defects in the drafting, or people can exploit it. But by and large, there are various laws which protect the people. And those work well, and those basically various, in other words, UK does not have a single constitutional document, but it has a lot of other laws which protect the rights of the people. You in England, you have a strong judiciary, you have a strong media, you have strong social groups, civil society groups. Because what we must remember is, if you have the wrong people governing, I won't use the word even power, the wrong people elected and supposed to look after the interests of the citizens, then they will do what they want, or they will twist the constitution to serve themselves. So in that sense, the constitution is an important document, but what we fail to realize, it's that it can be made better, and a democracy, and there could be true equality, good rule of law, everybody is equal, there is no discrimination, there is no division, there is no, say, claims to racial superiority or religious superiority, because after all these racial and religious concepts are only created by people. And often rulers create divisions so that they can rule by the others, the citizens are fighting. So that I would like to lay that background to impress upon ourselves, firstly, that the constitution is an important document. And it's necessary that we have a good constitution. If we had, in Sri Lanka, we speak of a democracy, where the people are sovereign, not parliament, not the president, not the judiciary. It's the people who are sovereign. And people means every person in Sri Lanka, whether the person is of any race, religion, it doesn't matter. Democracy is ruled by the people. It does not mean ruled by a majority community. It means an all-inclusive rule by the people. Every person counts. So you cannot, democracy is not ruled by a majority community or majoritarianism. It's a rule by the people, a majority taking into consideration all aspects of society, whether it's religion, race, or language. So if we have a constitution that is good, it can be abused by if the wrong people are elected. Even if you have a constitution that is not so good, yet you can have a true democracy if the right people are elected. And who's to blame? You and me. Because have we ensured that we put the correct people into power? People who not only are qualified, who are honorable, who are only interested in the good of the country rather than themselves. So therefore, I think the voters are largely responsible if there has been a chaos and a mess up in our governance or government. And this particular amendment that is being brought has a long history, because we are talking about the 21st Amendment. One of the things that we have to realize is whatever the constitution is, what is our political culture? We have had 74 years of independence. And are we better off? Have we developed? Look at the other countries around us. Everybody talks about it. Look at Singapore, look at Bangladesh, look at India, look at various other countries, Malaysia. In the late 50s, Ceylon, as it was then known, was ranked among the highest in Asia for standards of living, for the rule of law, democracy. Pathetically, we have fallen way back, way behind. Why? We have elected for the last 74 years people who have, majority of them, who have ruined our political system, have created a very, shall we say, dangerous political culture, which divides people and divides them and does it so that it can be exploited by the rulers for their own benefits. So that, successive governments have failed the country, and that is why we have led up at present to this crisis. And so there's no point merely blaming the present government. This present government is at fault, no doubt, but the previous governments too have to answer for a lot of the mistakes and the serious errors, especially in not looking after the interests of the country, but in looking after themselves, the rulers, and by creating divisions, hostility among the people of Sri Lanka based on race, religion, and language. And that is why the present constitutional amendment has been provoked by what they call the Aragalaya, the protest. This is a youthful, non-violent, peaceful protest that was begun. And it reflects a thinking that enough is enough. We cannot have the same thing going on. Maybe of late, things have escalated, have come to a major crisis, but we have always had these problems through the years. So for once, the younger generation has decided to take the lead, while the older generation has failed the country because they have tolerated all these rulers' acts of division, creating racial, religious disharmony. Okay? The younger generation has said enough is enough. We want a systemic change. We want a change for the better. We don't want things done the way they were. And they seem to reflect on the fact that what is important is that all Sri Lankans are equal and this country belongs to everybody. In fact, I may go one step further and say the country does not belong to everybody here and now. It is we who are supposed to live here in peace and harmony, look after it for the betterment of future generations. So we too are trustees. So this Aragalaya has brought about a change. And this is another important thing which we have to remember is, for once, the people have taken the initiative and said, we want change. And with the Aragalaya start, civil society, the other organizations have got involved and saying, yes, we too realize that we have not been active enough in ensuring that whoever comes to power, whoever is it going to, not power, whoever represents us in parliament or elsewhere, they have to be governed by fair laws, a system which they cannot abuse, where they cannot rob, they cannot have corruption, and they have to treat everybody equally. So that is the cry of the Aragalaya. But this constitutional amendment was provoked by, no doubt, by the Aragalaya and the protests island-wide. But it is also symbolic in that in 1978, J.R. Jayawardena started this executive presidential form of government, saying that it was essential to develop the country economically. It was essential to have an executive president who can act strong man, who can protect the minority interests and do this and that, etc. But within a few years, with the 1983 communal violence, we realized that the executive president was not what he claimed it to be. That the executive president, by successive presidents, have been used only in their own interests. They have abused their powers. And several executive presidents, including Chandrika Bandaranaike, Mahinda Rajapaksa, all promised to abolish the executive presidency. None of them did it. Because we realized that too much power in one person will lead to dictatorship, abuse of power, and therefore there has been, not of late, even over the years, a cry to abolish, for once and for all, get rid of the executive presidency and go back to a parliamentary form of governance. Now, it's significant that we had what you would call the 19th Amendment, which came in 2015 under the so-called Yahapalana government, where there was Ranil Wickremesinghe as Prime Minister and Maithripala Sirisena as the President. And they promised that 19th Amendment was only a temporary amendment, because when they passed that amendment, the promise was to bring about a brand new constitution once and for all, to change the system of politics, culture, to set up independent institutions. What we must realize is it's important to have independent institutions, because we don't have to be running to politicians or whoever it is for, sorry, we're in a power cut. So, well, I'm back online. I trust you can hear me. So we do not have to go and listen to, let's say, for everything. Now we have got a culture of running behind politicians to get children to school, to also, let's say, get jobs. That should not be their role. The politicians should be guiding by vision, running the country, and not getting involved in this day-to-day administration. There should be a fair system where all public institutions treat everybody equally and fairly and cannot be corrupt. And that is why it is important that under the 19th Amendment, just as much as the previous 17th Amendment, they brought back independent institutions. They want to create a greater independence of the police, because there are a lot of allegations that the police are sort of under political pressure and only do what their political masters want them to do. I saw the recent IGP statement that he had no hand in the appointment of OICs. Unqualified people were there. Of course, we have the allegation that even in Parliament, out of 225 people, only 90 people have passed the ordinary level exams and above. So you see, politics has become like a sort of a business for our representatives, not so much to look after the interests of the people. So to change this culture, the 19th Amendment wanted to bring forward independent institutions and processes. The judiciary, the police, the public service, the foreign service, and so that they can act independently without politicians telling them what to do. And also their appointments has to be by an independent constitutional council, so that only men of quality, qualifications, and integrity, who will not be yes men of the politicians, would be elected. Now, those are some of the main features of the 19th Amendment, which try to create independent public bodies to serve the people without political interference. Unfortunately, the Yahapalana government came a cropper, failed because of some acts of corruption, and also because the President, Maithripala Sirisena, and the Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe, started fighting like little children. They were not able to work together to deliver on their promises. Their promises, the main promise being to bring out a proper constitution, because the 19th Amendment was only a temporary measure till they formulated a proper constitution. Previously, in 2000, Chandrika Bandaranaike also tried to bring out a good constitution. She almost succeeded, but the UNP crippled it for maybe some good reasons. But here too, in the 19th Amendment, the Yahapalana government promised to do and change the whole thing so that we have a good constitution, abolish the presidency. That was the main thing, because if you remember, Maithripala Sirisena was not even given any portfolios except defense and also environment, but that is only for him. The moment the new, that's only for his presidency, the next president will not have any right to be a minister, because he won't be involved in government. He will be mainly involved with policies of let's say, declaring war and peace, emergency, accepting ambassadors and things like that. So that was the intention, but the Yabala government failed. Then came the Easter Sunday attacks and an attack on the 19th Amendment, saying this is a useless amendment because two people are fighting. We don't know who it is. So we want a strong man. And some people even said we want a strong man like Hitler, forgetting who Hitler was. But a strong man who will put the country right, because there was a breakdown in law and order, and there was also security threats because of the Easter Sunday bombing, saying that the Security Council messed up. Of course, we know that the Presidential Commission report strongly suggests that it was the Easter Sunday attacks was not the mere acts of so-called terrorists who belong to the Islamic faith, but that there was a hidden hand behind it, and that leading public figures or in governance or otherwise were also culpable and, if not negligent, in allowing the Easter Sunday attacks to happen. Then what happened? We had the election where the present president came home with a thundering majority. He rode on a wave of security, nationalism, racism, all these things, and an unprecedented majority. And well, his was a very divisive government, and he thought that with a one-man show you could run this country. And he also, in the meantime, did not delay in enacting the 20th Amendment after he won a thundering majority at the parliamentary elections. And they were able to pass the 20th Amendment, which gave all powers to the president, saying that we need a strong man. This country is in a mess. Only this man can deliver. He has a proven track record. And so, with the help of some crossovers, turncoats, who had their own reasons for supporting the 20th Amendment, we had this 20th Amendment, where an all-powerful president and a public service, a judiciary, a parliament, all made servants of his. In fact, it was significant when he gave oaths to the judges. He was standing on a high platform and sort of bending down and giving it to them like you would give your little child or a pet a morsel to eat. So the optics were all skewed. And there was this situation where everybody was expecting with a lot of hope, because there was Viat Telia, there was Viat Muggers. And 1.5 to 2 years down the line, though he had an initial success with the COVID by using the military, there was gradual militarization where all sorts of retired forces people were put in as secretaries. Because one of the problems of the 19th Amendment, which is not even cured today by this new amendment, is that it's the president who appoints a secretary to a ministry and removes him. So even if you have a good minister who's capable of working, the president can put retired colonel, retired commodore, retired so-and-so. One wonders whether they are capable civil administrators. And so there was cries of greater militarization, initial success in using the military in controlling the COVID, but then with this tax exemption, which virtually drained the economy of some money, which is mishandling of the fertilizer issue, the country was staring at an economic crisis. Notwithstanding several early warnings, nothing happened. The government went on regardless. Parliament did not play its role. And that's where we are here today with the Aragal. And we are in the brink of a collapse, a national catastrophe, which needs lots of effort, unity in the country, and people with proper vision and proper attitudes and ability to pull it out. And the president himself has admitted his failure in addressing the economic issue early and his failure in his agricultural policy. And a person who admits it, it's very strange that a person who admits such failure wants to continue to remain, one would say that it's either, maybe it should also be the public service, but in the private service, I'm sure you will agree with me that after about 2 years in employment, if you say you have failed on some critical factors, the honorable thing would be to resign before you are asked to go. But here, in the running of a country, there has been an admission of failure, but now with this, at the climax, when the crisis is there, the president assured that he will repeal the 20th Amendment, bring in the 19th Amendment with positives, so that there will be independent institutions, and the Prime Minister it'll move to a parliamentary democracy, where instead of one man, the 225 people, though we may say that those in parliament at present have also failed us, the responsibility will be 225 people who are elected from all of the country, representing all its people, irrespective of race or religion. So, having made that promise and admitted failure, if you look at the present amendment, the draft bill, my personal view is that it retains the 20th Amendment. It is indirect, it's aimed at protecting this failed president for the rest of his term, and it's aimed at also keeping the failed parliamentarians for the rest of their term. Because all it does is it brings in a procurement commission and also the audit. But if you see the Prime Minister's powers, as in the 19th, the President had to act on the advice of the Prime Minister in appointing ministers. Of course, there was a gap there. In removing, does he have to act? President has to act on the advice of the Prime Minister when he, say, assigns subjects to various people or appoints deputy ministers. Now, that is there today, but it says those provisions will not apply to the present parliament. In other words, for the 9th parliament. So in other words, he has to only consult. Consultation is a weak thing. He can say, what do you think of this? Can I do this? And if then the Prime Minister says, no, I think you should not do this, he can say, okay, I've consulted you, but I'm going to do what I want. So basically, my personal view is that this proposed amendment is in effect maintaining the president with his same powers, and it is in effect the 20th Amendment, which the president pledged to repeal and to bring back the 19th. What he has brought is not a 19th Amendment. He has brought an emaciated, weakened 19. What was intended was a 19 plus. In other words, an improvement on the 19. He has brought a 19 minus, minus, minus. So that you see that, and also some of the suggestions by civil society was bring the central bank governor under the Constitutional Council so that you don't appoint political stooges or people who are unqualified who will just listen to the president or the finance minister and carry out political programs. So that, and then also the Constitutional Council. If you look at the Constitutional Council, that was supposed to be a body which recommended or approved appointments to important positions like the police, the judiciary, the Auditor General, the Attorney General, all these offices. But the Constitutional Council originally, under the 19th Amendment, it was intended to have 5 civil society people and 5 from Parliament. But there it was diluted, 7 people from Parliament and only 3 civil society people. But in today's draft amendment, the 3 civil society people have to be jointly nominated by the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition and receive the approval of Parliament. Who controls Parliament? It is at the moment, it appears to be the government, the Porto government, which everybody, the people have admitted is failed. So this amendment does not address the calls of the people, the concerns of the people, which were mainly to abolish the presidency. And in the meantime, interim, at least reduce his powers. It's also a call of the people to give more power to Parliament to take responsibility and to have a Prime Minister who is answerable to Parliament. If he doesn't function, the 225 people can pass a vote of no confidence and ask him to go home. So instead of that, the present 21st Amendment does not address those issues. And in that sense, there have been statements issued by, if you look at the website of the Center for Policy Alternatives and Direction Sri Lanka, which is an organization in which I'm also a subscriber, where they maintained that the present 21st Amendment, in its significant features, will only apply after this Parliament and this President goes off. In other words, the 21st Amendment is used to protect the present government, to protect the present president, and hardly any reduction in powers, except that he can hold the defense ministry and he can hold other ministries only for a period of 14 days. But he can appoint anybody a minister because he's only got to consult the prime minister. He doesn't act on the advice. And look at even secretaries of the ministry. Even if you appoint a good minister, it's the president who appoints a secretary and removes. So he can put anybody he likes, which will cripple the competent minister from function. So if you look at, and also what was intended was to make, we know the problems of the central bank, not only the governor, but the monetary board, all of them to be appointed to this independent constitutional council, which has not been done. And we also suggested that the Right to Information Commission should be appointed through the Constitutional Council. The Right to Information Commission is one of the positives of the Yaparna government, where you could get, public has access to information related to contracts and various other documentation to expose corruption and abuse of power. Now, those commissioners have to be independent if they have to do their work well when the public tries to find information. So we wanted those officers also under the Constitutional Council rather than directly under the president appointing them. So you find that a lot of these features, and if you look at the Prime Minister, it doesn't say whether the Prime Minister ceases to command the majority of the ceases to command the confidence of the majority of Parliament. It says if, in the President's opinion, the Prime Minister does not command the majority. So he may think that, okay, there are 113 fellows who are supporting the Prime Minister, but my opinion, that's not enough, and I can remove the Prime Minister. So all these are provisions which don't really address the issue. And as I said, it seems to be that under the pretext of, say, fooling the people, a so-called draft bill has been presented, though they actually protecting the 20th Amendment, protecting the present government and the president. And now even one of the major things that was also there in the 19th Amendment was the president's powers to prorogue and dissolve Parliament. There is no restriction on him to do that, except for those time periods. But prorogue, he can prorogue at any time. I recall even Chandrika Bandanaka prorogued whenever she wanted, when she felt that there was a vote of, or Parliament was going against her. One of the situations was where Parliament wanted to impeach what they considered a rogue or errant Chief Justice. So when that motion came up, she prorogued Parliament. So that could not be discussed at the next Parliament session. Whereas that was cured by the 19th Amendment, which said that if there is a motion that is before Parliament and it is prorogued, that motion can be continued as a debate. So this proroguing Parliament, a temporary suspension of Parliament, or dissolving Parliament, the powers should have been he can only do it on the advice of the Prime Minister, unless Parliament itself passes a vote and says, let's dissolve. Because if there is chaos in Parliament, after all, there are 225 elected members from the country. And if they decide to dissolve Parliament, that's fine. Here is one man is saying this. He can dissolve, he doesn't have to consult the Prime Minister. So a lot of these, basically the 21st Amendment or the 22nd Amendment, whatever you may call it, which they have put forward as a bill now, goes against the very promises made by the president at the height of the crisis in May. He promised to abolish, promised to bring the 19th Amendment with positive. He has not abolished the 20th. He has not abolished the 20th Amendment. It seems to be that they are trying to do it through 21st, which is in effect protecting the 20th Amendment. So I think it is natural, unless, of course, the objective is to say, okay, we try to amend the constitution, and because there will be a lot of opposition to this latest draft bill for amendment by various opposition parties like the SJB, NPP, and I think even the TNA. And they will either boycott or vote against it, and they are going to say, okay, say we tried to amend the constitution, and what can we do? People did not support us. But really, this amendment that they're seeking to do is a farce. My personal view is it's a farce. And it's a cheating or a fraud of the people. Because you promise to do something, you're doing something else. You're where you have admitted failure and you have messed up the country and the economy, you want to survive for the rest of your term. That's what it's trying to achieve. So will it work? Yes, it will work. And it will be business as usual, as under the 20th Amendment is my personal view. So if you want it to work that way and not to work in the way the people expect it to work, it may work. And therefore, I think that what is important is that, as I said always, it's up to the people to decide and to be very vigilant throughout. You don't just elect people and allow them to be in parliament and run riot, but you've got to look at even the interim cabinet. I mean, we don't know whether it's coming or going. That's a different thing. But look at the constitutional amendments. This is most unsatisfactory, and it is not what was promised to do. It goes nowhere in reducing, forget abolishing. What is wanted is an abolishing of the executive presidency, for which a referendum may be necessary. And a referendum at this stage, I'm sure, let the people decide whether they want the presidency or not. Everybody has said enough is enough. But the story is we are trying to amend this constitution without having to go to a referendum. Why are we afraid of a referendum? Let the people decide. It's the people's constitution. People are subway. But having said that, what are they trying to do? They are bringing some amendment which makes no real change and keeps a government and a president who have failed the nation, who have virtually lost their mandate to the people, in power. Therefore, my personal view is that, will it work? I don't know what you mean, will it work? It's not intended to work. That's my personal view. It's intended to keep the status quo as before and business as usual. If that's what you meant by, will it work? Yes, but that is not working for the good of the nation or for once and for all changing this, shall I say, ruinous political culture that we have had in this country, where we have been divided, dictated to by politicians for their own ends and for their own, aggrandizement and earnings, and the country has suffered. And if we want this systemic change to wipe out corruption and to make sure they all are equal and there's good governance, this amendment does not answer the people's desires. Well, I think I've said what I have to as far as this amendment is concerned, and I hand it over to whoever is moderating or whatever it is. If there are any things that need clarifications, I have not gone into great detail, but I have anyway highlighted the main aspects. Thank you, and it's been a pleasure to be here, but I must add that Rohan Atukora gave me some glowing tributes. I don't know how much I'm worthy of it or whatever it is, but thank you all the same.
Thank you very much, sir. And all what I introduced you has become a reality from what you said. I mean, that's what I said, that you have very few good men who are prepared to say what they have to say, right? And I mean, the news is out just now that IMF has basically said that in the current context, that they are not agreed to come out to kind of supporting Sri Lanka, because when you have a situation that your income is 1.6 trillion and your expenditure is 3.4 trillion Sri Lankan rupees, who is it going to invest and help us to get out of the financial situation? Nobody's going to give this money. So there has to be drastic reforms, which means that we'll have to see how we're going to reduce our costs from 3.4 trillion expenditure, and how we are going to increase our income from the current 1.4 trillion, and to arrive at some degree of equilibrium, so that then people will say, I'm prepared to bail your country out, so that then we know that it's sustainable. So right now, the news coming from CNBC just now, sir, is that the agreement has not come to agreement between the government of Sri Lanka and IMF.
It's a very simple point, Rohantha. It's like this. You cannot have economic stability without political stability. That's a fundamental aspect. And there has to be credibility. So where, rightly or wrongly, there has been an upheaval, and the same guys who admit their mistakes want to remain in power, forget the IMF, can any sensible lender come to the aid and put in place programs where there is a breach of trust, there's a wide trust gap, and they know that it may not be honored. And besides, if there is instability, one does not know whether a subsequent government will even honor the agreements that have been entered into by this government. So what people should realize is they should be honorable enough to accept that the country needs stability, political stability, and that they have failed to deliver. And so that is something. But unfortunately, as some people say, the problem is, okay, you had the day when Dahanayaka lost his premiership and got into a bus and went home. And even Ranil Wickremesinghe of a different avatar, when he was the prime minister and they lost to, I think when Chandrika swept the boards, there was the attempt by, they say, of Gamdi Dissanayake to cobble together a coalition with Rauf Hakim. And Ranil refused. He said, no, she has got that, I'm going. But you don't have, that's not the caliber of people you have voted in today. Right? So for them, it's not a question of honor or shame. It is, so you get the government you deserve. So that is the problem we have today, just to put it mildly.
So now the question here is that, like, we are helpless from the public. What do we do? All which you can do happens to be that we can go and put a police entry. We can put a case against a particular individual, but that's all we can do. Now, the question right now, sir, is that, you have almost 40% of Sri Lanka's households, of 5.8 million households, who are earning a salary of maybe less than 40,000 rupees. Now, a piece of soap which was 63 rupees is today 230. It has gone 4 times. Our overall inflation is today touching 45%, and our food inflation is touching about 75%. That is as per the internal data. But if you take the global averages, our inflation is at 123%. So the point is that we cannot live. 40% of Sri Lankans don't have money to live. So we know that we are going to move to riots. Now, in this context, there's nothing that the general public can do. You have all the gas cylinders on each of the sides, which are on, and people have been waiting for months for gas. So now in this backdrop, how does, what role can the judiciary do to protect and fight for people?
Of course, the judiciary is a mixed bag at the moment, because after the 20th Amendment, The president has made the judiciary almost servile or subservient to it. And because you see all these appointments, all are done by the president, and there is no control. And he has, in fact, with his public statements, sometimes he has virtually threatened the judiciary. You must not interfere in government policy. So, but there are good judges. There are good people now. Like you recently see the cancellation of the pardon to Duminda Silva. That was one. Of course, the negative was the bringing of a person through a national list on the basis of his business prowess, where the judiciary, there's an arguable case. We respect the view of the judiciary, but the judiciary could have been a little more positive on those matters. Okay. So you find, and then also there are allegations of, say, divisions within the judiciary on political lines of favoritism. All that is fine, but then it's because there's no independence in the judiciary. So I don't know whether we can expect much from the judiciary, because judiciary has to technically function within the framework of the law. But as I said, it all depends on the people. And that is why I'm not advocating violence. But there is something called a non-violent revolution. If Gandhi could bring down the British Empire, okay, what are our people doing? Okay, Gandhi did not resort to violence. And if that's why the Aragala, the youth, they have taken the lead. But I think civil society and all should be able to say enough is enough. And it's time you went left and go. Because, I mean, you got to accept failure, and you cannot be given a chance to continue with this type of degree of failure. So I think it is up to, let's say, civil society, the chambers, which should take the private sector has to take a more active role, which I think unfortunately the private sector lacks, because you have also the private sector looking for favors from politicians. We forget, we got to level the playing field. So private sector is to a certain extent to blame, because if the private sector was united in making a level field and insisting on that, then they contribute to the economy. And of course, the university students have been very strong. But if you look at even like the government institutions and the trade unions, they take to the streets for all sorts of things. But they should, on national policy and various governance, those are matters that you need a lot of civil society participation. Because democracy is not about electing some guys and letting them rat. You have to call them to account and put the pressure on them. And the pressures on electors is not, I mean, ideally we have a good constitution where we can remove these guys even after 1 year if they don't perform, like the recall. But even if we don't have that, there should be, the judiciary can provide certain relief within the framework of the law. But there's only so much the judiciary can do. So therefore, I mean, unless you have very creative judges, but they are also, they can't create new laws, they have to work with the law. You can go on a fundamental rights application and you can cancel various wrong acts. But like if you look at our constitution, you have to impeach the president. J.R. Jayawardena himself boasted that I have put this in so that you can never remove me. You have to go through parliament, you go through the judiciary, then you come back to parliament, 2/3. So J.R. Jayawardena, the founder of this constitution, created this monster of the executive presidency, which he thought will be helpful to the UNP, but which has virtually destroyed the country. So I think it's more people power. Because if, for example, people come out openly and say, we want you to go, it's time before which the government will have to listen, and especially with this economic crisis. Because as you see, no sensible lender is going to help us if we are politically unstable. And where the government has lost its mandate, forget its popularity, it's up to the people to reclaim their sovereignty, because these people who were elected to look after the sovereignty of the people are running away the people's sovereignty. So the people have to reclaim it, and that is where you need a lot of, and the media has to play its role.
So, so you were very forthright in what you said, that the new or the watered down 21st Amendment is virtually like cheating the people. So what do we do in this context? I mean, what can we know that no country in the world is going to give any kind of funding without political stability. And we know that the 21st Amendment is drafted to bring in political stability. Now, given that,
I don't know whether it's drafted. I don't know whether it's drafted to bring in political stability. It won't bring politics. It'll keep the same old government in power. And it is
it
just
was, it was to be, but it has now been watered down.
Yeah.
So my question, sir, is what do you do, sir? What we have see, we are the people, general public, sir. That number one, we don't understand the intrinsic details. Number two, we don't know where to go, and the only people that we could turn to happens to be, the people of the caliber of yourself. So what can you all do, sir, in the current context where it's a make or break situation? You know what I'm saying, sir?
Yeah. Because unfortunately, now we as professionals, we are not persons who can, we may be able to take to the streets, but we can't resort to violence. We have to go within the framework of the law. But unless we are supported by the people, the media, and the youth to put the pressure, because there can be civil disobedience, not a question of, let's say, violence or damage to property. Definitely not, because that's anarchy, that's chaos, that's not in the interest of the country. So if there is a great degree of, everybody comes out and says enough is enough, and says we want it to go, because there's only so much, my personal view is there's only so much that the law can do. The best of constitutions can be abused by anybody, the best of constitution. As I said, it depends on the caliber of the person, the goodwill of the person whom we elect to power, who will just walk out. Like you see Churchill, he won the war. He lost the next election. He was sent home by the British people. And he did not say, I'm going to remain, no, I'm going to amend the constitution and stay. Okay? So it depends on the people. That's why we are to blame primarily. If we want to, as the people of the country, if we want to rectify it, we have to take steps into our own hand, where we have to resort to civil disobedience. To remember Gandhi's salt march. Okay? Right? He brought the British government down. There are little things that can be done by the people. I mean, that's why I feel that the youth have taken a good lead, and especially the people in the villages have taken a good lead to protest against the government. I don't know whether Colombo is vociferous and vocal enough. I don't think. All of us are comfortable in our comfort zones. We have our minimum petrol, we have our minimum food. It's the people who are really hungry and starving are more the people from the outer regions. Okay. So whether we show enough empathy, whether we get involved, we take it as a joint effort to change things for the better. And once and for all, say that if we are going to elect people in future, we must look at the list of the parties whom they present. Do we have 25% ladies? Do we have 50% guys who are qualified, who can run the country, who have passed more than the O levels? Of course, you may have very capable people from various industries, like top fishing people, top agricultural people, who may not even have the O levels. That's a different thing, men of integrity. But we should, as people, say, don't vote for this list, because this has proven failures, these have convicts, these are dishonest people. And because all parties think that they can nominate people who will win elections by hook or by crook. Okay? And we go and vote for them, and on promises of this and that. So we make that mistake. They don't give us from their largest. They give us from our funds. They give back our funds to the people, and they loot more. So our political culture is to vote on handouts like beggars, or to vote on stupid things like race and religion and all that. And we get deceived by these demagogues who come only, they are in it only for themselves. So that culture, our thinking has to change. If we don't think like that.
So there's a very interesting question coming. Thank you very much for the very candid views expressed on the 21st Amendment. Even though it is in a kind of a draft form, we sincerely thank you for being so forthright, because we don't have people of your caliber. And my question is, what is your advice to youth? Because we are studying either for the masters in LLM, masters in computer science or master's in business administration, and we are looking for our future to be positive. And we want to get a job, we want to buy a house. What is your advice, sir?
Well, unless I personally feel the advice is you have to join the Aragalaya. That's my personal view. Because we are not going to get, we are getting worse, as you can see. We are not going to get any better unless we once and for all here and now, we have, Yahapalana failed us. So many governments failed us. Unless once and for all we bring a systematic change, we will not, it's not only for the persons who are posing these questions, generations to come will curse us. Because this people are, there's a flight of people out of the country. Young people, some people want to come back here and stay, to change, to fight in the noble way, to make sure they put places. So the youth, and that is why this struggle is a very important struggle, but it's not a struggle of the older people, it's a struggle of the youth. So they have to join that struggle, break down the barriers of race, religion, and race, and make sure there's a level playing field. And that we once and for all bring a constitution which does not allow any dictators to come to power. And parliamentarians who are honorable, who are responsible, whom we can choose upfront, knowing who they are, rather than electing. We have convicts in parliament. Okay, we have convicts. We have people accused of drug dealing in parliament. I mean, what more do we want? I mean, okay, look at the conduct in parliament. You have found people throwing chili powder, throwing chairs. I mean, we elect them, right? So the youth has to once and for all take stock and say enough is enough. How do we elect? Whom do we elect? Because it's not only a constitution. We must make sure that the rogues and the rascals don't come into parliament. That's important.
So, sir, what are you saying, sir, that the 21st Amendment will not work?
Even if it's passed, it's a farce. It'll work to keep the present government in power and keep the present president with almost the same powers in power. A president who says, I have failed and I will go. A president who said, I will abolish the presidency and I will improve governance. Yes, he's keeping the status quo. So I personally feel the 21st Amendment should be shot down because it's not what they promised to do. The failed government, it's not what they promised to do. Under the guise of an amendment, they are only entrenching themselves and strengthening themselves to continue when in the face of it they have been total failures. So when you mean by work? If you want it to work like the 20th Amendment, yes, it might work. And do you want that? That's it. And I would think that it's a 20th Amendment, this amendment. I would not blame the SJB, the JVP, and any other parties who vote against it, because it is a fraud on the people. That's my view.
So what is the way out then? Where do we go from here?
I said there are very limited actions that we can try in a court of law, but it requires a huge mass movement to once and for all possibility, because you had 6.9 million people who voted. I'm surely those 6.9 people should realize, forget whom they voted in before, but whom are you going to vote in future? What are you going to have for the future? Not for us, but for the young people who are questioning me and you now, as well as for future generation. It has to be mainly extra legal. I'm not saying violence or illegal, but it has to come with severe public pressure all around for a united Sri Lanka. Otherwise, we cannot bring about the change.
So there's a very interesting question coming out. Don't you think that the government has a duty to provide with the basic essentials? And if they are not providing that basic essentials, don't we have a right to take legal action against them?
Yeah, that's why some people see the actions filed. You're talking about the economic rights, because of course, under our constitution, we have certain fundamental rights. right to equality, freedom of association, profession, against cruel, inhuman treatment, torture, and all those things. But we have not, there is what you call economic, social, and cultural rights. In other words, I should have a right to a decent, say, food, shelter, and clothing. Okay, that's economic rights. Now, they are in certain constitutions. People have been advocating for that, but there have been views for and against. They think that if you put it as a fundamental right, you're overburdening a country if it's not a very prosperous country. But it has to be a goal to be aspired or aimed at. So, in that sense, you can say, you can challenge a lot of the actions of the government, and there is a challenge in the Supreme Court at the moment, I think by the Bar Association, on the government messing up the economic situation and placing the citizens in severe hardship and dire need. There is. And that is violated because there's no point saying I have a fundamental right to equality. I have a fundamental right against arbitrary rule when you're killing me by starvation. All my rights will go into the grave. So, an innovative interpretation of the fundamental rights would, though we don't have economic rights, right to food, shelter, and clothing, you should be able to expand some of these fundamental rights against arbitrary rule, because obviously the government has brought us to this situation by being unreasonable. 2 years ago, they were being warned, we are heading for a catastrophe. Do something. So we had some spin wizard from the central bank said he has a homegrown solution. Then I think Oranta knows him very well and personally. I don't know whether he's a buddy of yours. Then we also had some other guys who were claiming of a homegrown solution which never materialized. That was criminal negligence. And you found a lot of people, like even a lot of the chambers and all, for once got active and said, do something. Else we are going to countries heading for a catastrophe. These warnings were given about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. Go to the IMF. No, why should we go? Because we have this stupid notion of sovereignty, foreign interference. We can borrow money from India and China and all that. That is not sacrificing our sovereignty. But to go and negotiate with IMF because they thought IMF will bring certain conditions. We should be able to drive a hard bargain and say this we can do, this we cannot do, this we can phase out. So these guys went with these outdated political slogans. Why should we negotiate with the West, Western imperialism and all that type of petty, childish talk, and shelve this whole thing and put us in this situation. So therefore, there is a violation of our fundamental rights. But the question is, unless we can ask for damages from the president and the cabinet of ministers and the parliamentarians and the most honorable governors and all these people, that might take time. The point is the law. Sometimes it takes time. Like even people say recovery of stolen assets takes time. So, but what we want is an immediate solution to our economic crisis. So that is why the IMF and all, as you say, they will negotiate if we have a stable political platform, which we don't have at the moment because of the unreasonableness of people who want to remain in power while admitting that they have failed.
So there's a very interesting question coming. It says, given that we are helpless in Sri Lanka, is there an international court that we could appeal to for the government not doing what it was supposed to do?
That's a good question. International Court of Justice, there is universal jurisdiction. There are various mechanisms that, if it's a violation of human rights, like you see, universal jurisdiction is there. Like Michelle Bachelet and the UN High Commissioner has said that they have gone one step further and said individual countries can take up this because you are member states. You can inquire and investigate and prosecute people who violate human rights. So if you bring it under human rights, there should be, because though people say human rights is a dirty word, it's a Western creation, it's all wrong, because our Oriental culture, our major religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, all speak of the fundamental rights and equality of everybody. They don't use the word fundamental rights and human rights. The West has perfected it, but sovereignty is an alien concept. We didn't have sovereignty because we had a lot of kings in Sri Lanka, not one king. I'm not talking of now, I'm talking of in history. So that there should be a avenue to take the government of Sri Lanka to another court abroad for violation of human rights.
So it's fantastic chatting with you, sir, and I sincerely thank you on a Friday evening. I know we don't have lights, but it's 8:15, and I've kept you. Um, uh, I mean, I'm so grateful for the very candid comments. We have a lot of speakers who come, but as you say, they have their own um, um, reasons as to why they cannot express their point of view. But it's so lovely to hear the reality, the way that reality has to be seen. And it's very sad that, you have very few people in this country who can say this. And, what a lot of people forget is that now we have to say what we have to say today. We have to say it now, because tomorrow is too late. Tomorrow, when I say, is not in another 100 years' time, but tomorrow, because people are dying. People really don't have the income to pay for their expenditure, and in fact, people are throwing their children into the river. It has come to that. So, thank you sincerely, sir, for being here today, and we really wish you the best for the work that you do on behalf of every Sri Lankan. And can I invite Ruth, who handles our industrial relations? Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you. My pleasure was mine.
Good evening. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Right. Mr. Geoffrey Alagaratnam, what can I say? You have so beautifully broken down the Constitution, the sequence, the causes and effects of the various constitutional amendments and what it has done. And you very calmly illustrated the making of this predicament that we are currently in, very calmly. But most of all, what I would like to sort of highlight is that amongst all that you've said and all that has been happening, the build up to this date, you have also illustrated and shown us that Sri Lanka was not always like this. Back in the 70s, we were greatly appreciated. We were a great nation. The world appreciated us, and we were an example to other nations. So I think, to youth, young adults and youth of this generation, I think that should be sort of a strength, a button to use to say that, no, we're not always like this. We've not always had these struggles. And there's hope. If in the past it was possible, then of course the future can be built based on that history that we were once great. So I think that's my takeaway from this session of our MBA Diary this week. And I hope that our young audience that is tuning in with us today would also see that, there was a beautiful garden called Sri Lanka with lots of rosy things happening and not always a dark and weeded place to live in. So with this said, thank you so much for being our guest speaker in this week's MBA Diary session. You have just been wonderful and calm in giving us this information, these insights. And also, I'd like to say thank you to our technical team at PID for supporting us throughout this session. Last but not least, to our fabulous audience, our students and alumni, our industry partners, and our well-wishers in Sri Lanka and abroad. So thank you, everyone. A lovely day, a lovely evening, and a good night to one and all. Thank you very much. Okay. Until we meet next week.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.